known in many circles for creating what is known as your quadrilateral, the Bebbington quadrilateral, something that I heard about in school. And I know that many in our audience may or may not be familiar, probably not familiar unless you're an academic. What is the Bebbington quadrilateral, and why is it important for us understanding evangelicalism today?
Once, when I was at Baylor University, where I've quite often visited, I was there last semester, they very kindly arranged a special dinner to mark my 60th birthday. And I was ever so grateful. And somebody kindly made a speech, and then I had to respond. And the question of the evangelical quadrilateral had been raised by the speaker. So I had to comment on that. So I had to think of the 4 characteristics that I have said evangelicalism stresses, hence the quadrilateral, the 4 stresses. And unfortunately, when I'd gone through 3, I forgot the 4th. So there is a risk of that happening again. However, what the evangelical quadrilateral is a comment on how evangelicals have expressed their faith from the 1730s, when the movement first began, right up to the present day. And my insistence, on the basis of evidence from America, Britain, and indeed throughout the rest of the world, is that evangelicalism has rested on emphasizing 4 characteristics. One is the Bible. The Bible is the authority for religion, but it's also the support of evangelical spiritual lives. A second is the cross. The atonement is what redeems us from slavery to sin, and the blood of the Lamb is what actually saves us. A third is conversion, that people are not automatically Christians, that they have to be converted to become true Christians. And the fourth is activism, that you actually express your faith in doing lots of things, spreading the gospel, certainly, and also, at most stages of evangelical history, but not always, engaging in active social concern. Now, I'd want to stress that evangelicals have been people who have emphasized those 4. Other types of Protestant Christians in particular have upheld those positions, but they haven't always emphasized those points more than other points. Within the Church of England in the 19th century, other Christians, whether high churchmen or broad churchmen, emphasized not the atonement, but the incarnation. And that was a trend associated with the Romantic movement I've already spoken of. But that tended to take the Christian movement in Britain and elsewhere away from the evangelical priorities. But I'd want to stress, therefore, that evangelicals are people who have emphasized those 4, not just held them, emphasized them. I'd also want to say that this is not really a definition. Definitions are what theologians do, and I'm not a theologian. I would call it a characterization. It is actually a description of how evangelicals have in practice been at many places, at many times. Indeed, I would say in all places and in all times there have been evangelicals, and they've shown these common characteristics. They've shown an enormous number of other variations, and I'm fascinated by the variations, which are not least affected by the sort of cultural currents I've spoken of already. But those 4 elements say, here's an evangelical, here be evangelicals. But that is, as it were, a phenomenology of evangelicalism. It's saying that that's what the phenomenon has consisted of over time. And I did actually produce a couple of books a couple of years ago called The Evangelical Quadrilateral, which backs up that contention by having essays on various aspects of the movement. I'm afraid in Britain, there are mentions of America, but most of the chapters are about Britain rather than America. And they point out the evidence for that characterization being valid. So I do still adhere to that notion, which has become very popular because other people have noticed that it reflects the evidence. If it didn't reflect the evidence, I wouldn't hold it. I'm not claiming to be the inventor of evangelicalism. I'm claiming to be the discoverer of a phenomenon that has existed over time and over space.